A little bit about our teacher, in case you are just joining. Rabbi Daniel Silverstein teaches at many places around the world, including Romemu Yeshiva in New York City, and an online learning platform he runs called Applied Jewish Spirituality. That is the link that I just put in the chat box. In 2015, he was selected by the Jewish Week as one of the 36 young leaders remaking the Jewish community. His interests include Kabbalah, meditation, and embodied spirituality. So welcome back, Rabbi Silverstein. I'm going to turn it over to you in a second, but I will also let folks know that Rabbi Silverstein will be teaching a class on Rabbi Nachman this July. And I'll also post the link to that event. And if you're on our mailing list, you'll get information about that upcoming. So I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Julie. For the last time in this series, thank you so much for this opportunity and this sweet, sweet community we built. So nice to see some of you for the 12th time, or the 3rd time, or the 5th time, and some of you for the 1st time. Really lovely to be. This has really been like a highlight for the last year to know like this is happening every month and we're going to do this. It's lovely. So thanks everyone for joining. So Tammuz, open the handout if you haven't already. I'm going to share my screen though as well, and you'll see it's actually a pretty challenging month. Let's open it up and get to it. I'm going to share my screen now. We'll start seeing what the tradition says about it. It's actually not such a easy, happy story. You can all see that, right? Tammuz seeing things as they are. You can see the great, awesome. So yeah, sight is the key here. So those of you who have been in the class before, you may remember Sefer Yetzirah, the oldest mystical Jewish text we have, and it gives us information about every one of our 12 Hebrew months, and that information includes a letter of the alphabet connected to the month, a part of the body connected to it, an astrological sign connected to it, and a human faculty or activity. So we've had before movement and eating and sleep, and now we have here in this month that the faculty or activity connected with our month, as it says in the first line of the source there, is he made the letter Chet king over sight. So Chet is the letter of this month, and there's a lot of great teachings about that too. We don't have time in this class to go into that. If anyone's especially interested in that, you're welcome to email me, contact me, and I'll be very happy to send you some stuff on the Chet and how it relates to the work of the month. But we have to focus a little bit. But sight is what we're going to focus on in this class, the faculty of seeing and sight, what that means spiritually, and what our work is, especially in this month, as like the headquarters of that to work on. So that's just we're not even going to read all of Sefer Yetzirah. That's also just like we're just taking out that one piece of information to work with it, as the later Kabbalists do. That's what they do with it generally. They take out little bits from it. So we're going to see a teaching now from the great Hasidic master in Poland, Rav Sadok Cohen. He passed away in 1900, so really on the eve of modernity, and he has a real beautiful way of taking ideas from ancient texts and from Kabbalah and putting them into a spiritual practice, which often has a kind of modern feel to it, often speaks to modern psychology. He says, I'm reading here, Pri Tzadik on Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. Rosh Chodesh is the new moon, the first day of Tammuz. He says the first seeing mentioned in the Torah is about light, as in the verse, and God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. Genesis 1:4. So very close to the beginning of the whole Torah. Genesis, the 4th verse of Genesis. Somebody sees something, and it's God seeing light. So seeing is like incredibly core and primal in the Torah. It's not something that happens, down the line. It's like right there at the beginning of the creation of the universe. And he says, wherever something is first mentioned in the Torah, that is its root. This is an important principle for the Kabbalists. To find out what something really means, they look in the Torah and they want to know, where did it first appear? Where did a certain word, idea, activity, whatever it is first appear? And wherever it first appeared in the Torah, that tells you something definitive about what that is. So for Rav Sadok, he's pointing out to us that something about God seeing the light and separating it from the darkness, that is absolutely fundamental to everything about sight and our spiritual work of sight and vision. And he actually gives us a clue here in the next little bit. And the light was recognized in its differentiation from the darkness. That's the key. That sight is all about differentiation. Of course, we know now, in like modern scientific terms, that when we're seeing something, what's really happening is reflected light is hitting our eye from that object. And so it's very much about differentiation, because light is hitting my eye from all kinds of different things, and it's different colors and showing me different information depending on what it's reaching my eye from. So throughout the class, we'll keep working on that idea and seeing it in different angles and seeing kind of practices, like practical advice for working on our faculty of vision based on these teachings. See a little something now from the Zohar, which is really the core text of Kabbalah. It tells us something about our month, which is part of why it's so challenging. Zohar 278b, first source on the second side if you're looking at your own sheet. So it says, Jacob obtained in his mystery 2 months, Nisan and Iyar, and he is included in the month of Sivan, which is Gemini, twins. Esau, that's Jacob's twin, obtained in his mystery 2 months, Tammuz and Av, but then he is not to be found and vanishes. For Elul is not his, not even Av, just 9 days belong to him and no more. So what's going on here? Jacob is the third patriarch of the Jewish people. We are called Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, after Jacob. Jacob is also called Israel or Israel. So Jacob is the good guy from our perspective, from the Torah's perspective, and from the Zohar's perspective. And Esau is his evil twin, especially from the perspective of the Zohar. The tradition as a whole is actually quite complex on Esau. Like, maybe he's not such a bad guy, maybe he actually made teshuvah, made amends, returned, made a fix in the end. But from the Zohar's perspective, Esau is definitely bad. He's connected with the other side, the side of the demonic, with evil and so on. And what's going on here is that we're being told, according to the Zohar, that the months of the year have a dominant energy. Some of them have the dominant energy of Jacob, i.e. good. Good things happen in them. That's Nisan and Iyar. Nisan, we come out of Egypt. Iyar, God is giving us the manna. We're being looked after in the desert. That's, the months we had not that long ago in spring. But there were certain months where actually the dominant energy is not the energy of Jacob. That's like our home turf. We're playing at home. That's ours. That's good. We're playing away. We're playing on the side of the evil twin. These months, Tammuz and Av, actually belong to Esau. And actually, interestingly, it's not all of Av. It's just Av up to the 9th day of Av, which some of you may know is the fast of Av. The 9th day of Av is Tisha B'Av, the fast, when we commemorate the destruction of both temples and many other tragedies. And what the Zohar is saying here is, actually, it's just pretty much Tammuz and the beginning of Av, which sucks, which is hard, which is in the domain of Esau, the evil twin. And the rest of the year, actually, not so much. The rest of the year is fine. Now, there's some complexity around some of the other months in the year, but basically, Tammuz is a hard month, is what we're being told here. Don't expect good things to happen in Tammuz. And actually, we're going to see some other classic rabbinic texts now about that, about specifically why we start in Tammuz the 3 weeks of mourning that lead up to the fast of Av, Tisha B'Av. That's the subject of the next source, the Mishnah in Ta'anit. And Ta'anit actually means fast. So it's a whole tractate of the Talmud. Here's first the Mishnah and then the Talmud expands on it. It's a whole tractate about fast days, including the fast days that we are going to have soon, one in Tammuz and one in Av in the traditional calendar. So let's look at this Mishnah Ta'anit 4:6. 5 events befell our ancestors on the 17th of Tammuz, and 5 on the 9th of Av. So those 2 dates are the bookends of the 3 weeks of mourning. Begins in Tammuz, ends in Av, and both the beginning, the 17th of Tammuz, and the end, the 9th of Av, are fast days. And in between, there's all kinds of mourning practices in traditional practice. Some people don't listen to music, we don't have weddings, and so forth. So 5 events happened on the 17th of Tammuz and 5 on the 9th of Av. On the 17th of Tammuz, the tablets were broken. So that is Moses coming down from the mountain, Charlton Hester moment, carrying the tablets. He sees the golden calf, the Egel Zahav, and he throws the tablets down and breaks them. So it's the breaking of the tablets is significant. Of course, the reason why they're being broken is the sin of the golden calf. That's really the crux of the matter. That's the first thing that happened on 17th. What's next? The continual offering was ended. So we might think, well, we haven't had a continual offering for a long time. We're not missing it so much. At the time, it was a big deal. There had been a daily offering, continual offering in the temple for as long as there was a temple, which at this point, it's talking about the point in the Second Temple when the Romans began to side with one of the factions within the Hasmonean royal family and turn them against the rest of their family and the rest of the Jewish people. And it was basically the beginning of the end of the Second Commonwealth when the Romans began to get a foothold in the land of Israel and control over Jerusalem. And ending the continual offering was a very significant step on the way to the temple no longer functioning at all, and then eventually being destroyed. So it was like a sign that we're losing autonomy, we're losing the power to have the animals and the freedom to offer what we want to offer when we offer, because the Romans were tightening their siege around the city and tightening their control and so on. So the tablets were broken. The Romans stopped us offering the continual daily offering. The city walls were breached. So similar kind of idea, like a step on the way to the destruction of the city. Apostomus burned the Torah. So that is a little bit earlier, actually. That's actually the time of the Greeks, the time of like around the time of Hanukkah. So the Torah was burned on this day also. An idol was placed in the temple courtyard, also the time of the Greeks. So, and I think the Romans did that too. So we've got the breaking of the tablets, and then we've got a lot of things that happened around the story of the city and the temple Jerusalem and the temple being destroyed, especially by the Romans second time around. On the 9th of Av, it was decreed upon our ancestors that they would not be allowed to enter the land of Israel. So when did that happen? That happened, if you happen to be following the Torah cycle, you happen to know what happened in the few recent readings in Torah, you may know, there was a story of the spies, the Meraglim. They come back from the land, they say, it's a good land, but FS, no chance, we can't do it, we can't go in. And the people believe them, people listen to them, the people cry. And God says, because you have not had faith in me, because you've listened to the spies and you didn't think we could go into the land, your whole generation who left Egypt, who are adults now, will not be able to go into the land. Only your kids will be able to go in. So that's a decree that a whole generation won't go into the land. The first and second temples were destroyed. So Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, is the saddest day in our calendar. It's primarily associated with this. First and second temples destroyed on this very day. Beitar, that's the key city in the Jewish revolt against Rome later, was captured, and the city of Jerusalem was plowed over. From when the month of Av starts, we rejoice in joy. So I mentioned before there's 3 weeks of mourning between these two bookend dates. The last 9 days of those 3 weeks are the first 9 days of the month of Av. So from the 1st of Av to the 9th of Av, it's called the 9 days of mourning, and it's even more intense mourning than 3 weeks. Now in this class, we actually are not going to be especially focusing on the 3 weeks. We have other juicy, interesting things to talk about with Tammuz and the sense of sight in our work of the month. But this is just really, really important context. And like most months have a festival. Most months have like some good, big, happy, lovely thing that happens in them. This is kind of the festival of Tammuz. Like this is the closest we get to a festival. The 17th of Tammuz is close to the full moon. And unfortunately, it's not a happy festival. So it's important that we know, like, this is a very important piece of the energy of the month. Now, as I said, we don't have time in this class to go into this, partly because I deliberately left it because it's happening in the second half of the month and we're just beginning the month now. But what I'm going to say is I have a class on 3 weeks. Actually, I have a few, but like one especially ready on the 3 weeks. And if anyone's interested in learning more about the 3 weeks and the second half of Tammuz and Av, then please feel free to be in touch with me. I'll be very happy to send you the sheet and a video recording of the class, and then you can like carry on in that way. Okay, so we've got the 3 weeks, we've got the bookends, we've got the 9 days. One more source from the Talmud, Tanit 29a, right underneath. And this is taught in a Tainetic source. So that's a source from the people who wrote the Mishnah between the years roughly 0 and roughly 200. So those sages wrote this, or said this originally, and then it was written down. On the 29th of Sivan, Moses sent the spies, and it is written, and they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days. What's going on here? We saw above in the Mishnah that the decree that the generation who left Egypt, the adults, are not going to go into the land of Israel, the decree saying that they are not going to go into the land of Israel was given on the 9th of Av. And the Torah says that the spies were scouting out the land, were being spies for 40 days. So the rabbis love playing this little game of chronology. They count backwards 40 days from when they got back and the decree was given. And they say, now we know when the spies were sent. And when were they sent? Right at the end of Sivan, the previous month just before Tammuz, which means basically our whole month of Tammuz is most of the period when the spies were doing their mission, were spying out the land. And unfortunately, as we know, it didn't go very well. And remember, spying is done primarily with the eyes. So we're going to see one more source now together about that, and then we're going to come back together I want to hear questions and comments and things arising from all this. This will be the last thing we're going to do. There's a Hasidic commentary called the Bnei Yisachar. It specializes actually in what goes on in the calendar. His specialty is the spiritual work of each month. The book is actually structured month by month. He's also a Polish master. Now he says, the permutation of the divine name which governs Tammuz is Hey, Vav, Hey, Yud. I better explain that before we go on. Actually, he explains it a little bit, but I better say something about that. Every one of the months, according to the Sfat Kabbalists, the Kabbalists of northern land of Israel in the 1500s, like Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Arizal, every one of our months has a way of arranging the letters of the four-letter divine name, that's Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, a way of arranging those letters differently depending on the month. And who cares? Why is that significant? Well, it matters because the Kabbalists say the way you arrange those letters is the way that God's energy flows into the world in that month. So the letters have different qualities. In fact, you can see, if I highlight them here on my screen, you can see the difference between the Hey. There are two Heys, right? There's Hey, Vav, Hey, Yud. So a Hey, you can see, kind of looks like a vessel that something flows through. And that's exactly what the Kabbalists say it is. A Vav, the word Vav means a hook, and it's a connector. And Vav at the beginning of a word means and. So Vav means this is going to connect something to something else. Hey again is a vessel that things flow through. And Yud is all about like the tiny seed or spark of energy. Now, depending on what order you put those in, you get a different relationship between the creator and the world, according to the Kabbalists. So fascinatingly this month, as he tells us here, our month's version of the divine name is exactly backwards from the real name as we usually know it. It's usually Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, and this month it's Hey and Vav and Hey and Yud. So the way that God's energy flows into the world normally is exactly reversed this month, whatever that means. He's going to tell us a little bit about what that means. He says this means that the permutation, the way of arranging the letters for Tammuz, is completely backwards, which signifies din, judgment. What's he talking about? In Kabbalah, there's something called the tree of life. The different qualities of God and life are mapped onto this tree of life. Some of you may be familiar with the Sapphire rock. And normally, the most common way that God engages with the world is through positive attributes like loving kindness and compassion. That's chesed and rachamim. But he's saying, because this month is reversed, and remember, this is similar to what we saw about saying that, most of the months are actually under the side of Jacob, but this month is under the side of Esau. Because this month is backwards, he's saying this month, God's usual way of engaging with the world, primarily through loving kindness and compassion, is actually reversed. So God primarily engages with the world this month, apparently, through judgment, through severity. Din is also a synonym for gevurah, for severity. So actually, in other words, we might get like a serious hard time this month. We might get a lot of challenges this month. And of course, that completely fits with what the tradition said happened during this time. So all these things are saying the same thing from different angles, right? Historical and spiritual. As he says, therefore din holds sway over this month. And even before the 17th of Tammuz, these days are the days that the spies journeyed. So these are not really days of overwhelming rachamim, compassion. So what's he saying? He's saying you might think that the challenges, let's not say bad, let's say challenges of this month, you might think they only start after the 17th of Tammuz when we begin those 3 weeks of mourning. But he's saying, no, not so much. Even before that, this whole month, as we learned before, the spies are doing their mission, which went so badly, which caused so many bad things to happen. So actually, basically, this whole month is challenging. That's the bad news. And we're going to see there's a lot of great work we can do with that. These challenges are actually great opportunities for growth. But I had to like set out the stall openly and honestly from the beginning to say, you know, this is not like the month of Purim or Pesach where it's like overwhelmingly good. There's challenges, and then we learn how to like turn those to good. But first, before we do that, that's in the next section, let's just come back together so I can hear any insights which are arising for everyone or any questions. I'm going to first of all look on the chat, and then I'd love to see if anyone wants to raise your hand for anything. So great, Judy, thanks for answering that question about the Adars. I'm seeing if there's any here I missed. Wait, Melanie says, how did the broken tablets happen in Tammuz if Ki Tisa is way before in the calendar? Brilliant question, Melanie. So this is really important to clarify. I'm so glad you asked. There are like several different chronologies happening at the same time in Jewish practice. The Torah cycle follows its own pattern of like, you know, now we read this story, now we read that story. And it isn't always in sync with what's going on in the calendar. Sometimes we read about things in the Torah at different times of year, just because that's where we're up to in the book. And sometimes it just so happens those things actually line up really well. And actually around this time of year, sometimes especially that happens, which is like convenient, but it's actually a coincidence when it happens, because really there's two different cycles going on there. So we're going round and round with the Torah, and the months are doing their thing, and occasionally there's synchronicity, but really it's like two different ways of going through it. And I'll just give you one really nice example of how they work together, even though they're not exactly in sync. We always read about the Exodus from Egypt around the time of Tu B'Shvat, which is usually 2, sometimes 3 months before Passover. So it's like a kind of warm-up. And Tu B'Shvat is indeed a warm-up for Pesach. We even have a Tu B'Shvat Seder, and the Kabbalists see it as like a kind of dry run for Pesach, like getting ready for Pesach. So it's not that the two things happen at the same time, it's like there is a kind of relationship between these two cycles. So a great question. Thank you for asking. Raymond says, is there a study that the Messiah would be born on the 9th of Av? Yeah, there's a beautiful source that says that in Jerusalem Talmud. It's actually a gorgeous, I really love the source, and I really love teaching it. And it's in my class on Av, which I'll send you if you ask me to, very happily, because it's a gem. Yeah, I was very happy when I found that. It's something a lot of people talk about this source, and like when I actually found it and I translated it, it was a machaya, as they say. I see a hand raised by Miss B. Mia Reed. Please, what would you like to ask or say?
I was, thank you very much. I was wondering if you could repeat again the meanings of the Yud He Vav He. So I got the vessel, but it was the rest of it that I had never heard it before, and it was fascinating. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry if I went a bit fast with that. So the He, as you got, is a vessel, and it looks like that. It looks like something flows through. Vav means hook or connector, and also the letter Vav is also how you write and say and in Hebrew. Like if I want to say X and X, I say X va X, and it's a Vav. So Vav both looks like and means connector or hook or and. So that's what Vav is. It's something which connects things, connects different people, different energies, different worlds, lets energy connect through them. And then Yud is like the seed or the spark of life or energy that everything else comes from. So usually when the name of God, as it's usually written and how we usually use it, the Yud actually comes first, because like that's the seed or the spark that everything comes from. So it's kind of strange, and like it would require quite a long time to go into and explain exactly what it means to say that comes last. But essentially it means we're being given the instruction to make that small. Maybe this is actually helpful. This is something I didn't clarify. So in terms of like the spiritual practice based on the 4 letters, the Kabbalists connect it to what they call the 4 worlds, which is like the 4 dimensions that we all exist in. So there are also these 4 worlds cosmically, according to the Kabbalists, and they're also kind of complex because they all exist within each other. But what we need to know for our practice is like this. There's the world of physicality, there's the world of emotion, there's the world of intellect, and there's the world of spirituality. And those letters of God's name, the position of them relates to it. So, you know, I want to explain this properly. Let's go. Let me share my sheet again, and then you know, I'm gonna talk us through this just really, hopefully make this clear. So I'm gonna highlight here. This is the divine permutation of our month, right? Hey, Vav, Hey, Yud. The Kabbalists say that the first letter relates of the permutation, whatever it is, relates to the world of spirit. So usually, or in a kind of ideal situation, that's Yud, which is like the seed or spark of everything is spirit. In our month, spirit is some kind of vessel that things pass through. So that's already like an interesting thing for us to think about, that spirit, that like our spiritual being, our soul, whatever you want to call it this month, is actually kind of a vessel. And then the second letter, which here is a Vav, is the world of our intellect, our thoughts. So in the kind of ideal permutation, that's Hey, which is a vessel. But here in our month, it's Vav, which is a connector. So we're being asked to think about, to try and do this, to think about what it means to use our intellect, use our thoughts and our mind this month to connect different parts of our being, rather than other ways that we could use our internet. And then the next one is the world of our emotions, which here we're being told is a vessel, because it's Hey again. And finally, what the Yud here relates to the world of physicality, of our physical needs, which actually is really interesting, because as I said, the kind of main festival of this month, not really a festival, is a fast day, where we suddenly negate our physical needs to try and gain something spiritual. So that's like a little kind of walkthrough of like the way the Kabbalists use this system. Again, you know, it would take much longer to go in more depth, but I hope that's helpful. Let me come back together, see if anyone else, oh good, I see the thumbs up, awesome. Anyone else want to ask anything or share any insights that are coming? Oh, glad you like that, awesome. Great, all right, well look, I've given you guys a lot of bad news and I actually feel pretty bad about that. I don't normally like to you know, come on so heavy. So let's do the good news. Let's do the good spiritual work that we can do this month, you know, based on the challenges that we've seen laid out. And that's what section 2 is about. If you're looking on the handout, we're going to start section 2 now. So sight, vision, as we saw, key to this month. And actually, very soon after the whole story of the spies, which, as we said, was doing their job during this month, we get given this very strange commandment, which you may or may not be familiar with, that actually has become like quite an important commandment for a lot of practicing Jews, which is tzitzit, the tassels, the strange tassels that we wear on the corners of our four-cornered garments. And you know, some of you may be familiar with the tzitzit people wear under their clothes. Some of you may be more familiar with the talit, the prayer shawl that we wear over things that has tassels in it sometimes just white, sometimes also with blue in it, because there's different opinions about, you know, if the blue that the Torah mentions is indeed the blue that we have these days and we should use it or not, and so on. So this is what we're going to read now, is the Torah giving us the commandment of the tzitzit, which again, bear in mind, happens very soon after the whole story of the spies. And a lot of commentators connect them and see them as see it as a kind of remedy for that. So it says, Numbers, book of Numbers, 4th book of the 5 books of Moses, speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout the ages. This is God speaking. Let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe at each corner. This shall be fringes for you, and when you see it, you will remember all the commandments of the Eternal, that's me, to perform them, and you shall not wander after your hearts and after your eyes, after which you are going astray. So that's us getting this commandment, very much connected to sight and vision, as we're seeing, right? You see, we get told to put this thing on our clothes, and we're being told, very importantly, that something important happens when we look at it, when we see it. When we see it, we remember the commandments, and we will not wander, stray, after our hearts and our eyes, specifically. And actually, I want to point out this word for straying. Well, there's two words here. There's velo taturu, first of all, which is, as we're going to see in one of the commentaries, the same verb that's used for the spies scouting out the land, taturu, to tour. By the way, the English word for touring is related, right? Tour, to scout, right? And also there's zonim achareihan, this word here, going astray, literally means whoring, because straying from God in the Bible is very often compared to straying from fidelity in a romantic relationship. So like worshiping idols and committing adultery or whoring is like a lot of interchangeable words and ideas in the Bible. Okay, so that's the Torah itself. Let's look now at our foremost commentator, our primary commentator, Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki. He's writing in the 11th century in France, but almost everything that he brings in his commentary, which is classic and printed with the Torah very often from when he wrote it, and then, from when the printing press was invented, then it was written out by hand. But it's totally like become part of the Torah for a lot of traditional communities. His commentary is not so much original teachings that he's coming up with in the 11th century. It's more like an amazing selection of earlier ancient teachings from the ancient rabbis to the Midrash on the Torah. So think of him as an amazing DJ. It's primarily about the selection and the way he mixes it together that makes it so classic. But he says, commenting on this verse, make for themselves fringes, the commandment that we're given to do this. He says, it is called tzitzit. Yeah, it's a strange name, right? Why is this word? It is called tzitzit because of the threads that hang down from it. Similar is in Ezekiel, and he caught me by the curls tzitzit of my head. So this is a really interesting, thing. I like to think about where words come from, and especially where the tradition says words come from. It's fascinating. There's real depth there. So in this story in Ezekiel's a prophet. An angel, a fiery being from another world, is picking up the prophet Ezekiel and dragging him by his curls. So that's like the first source that Rashi brings about tzitzit. So it's like something to do with the relationship with spirituality, not necessarily actually, a kind of like easy one or one where there seems to be even like human free will involved. Like we're being essentially like taken against our will somewhere. So that's interesting. Let's see what his second one is. And this one maybe give us more to work with for us, I think. Another explanation is, it is called tzitzit because of the command associated with it. And when you see it, as we saw that above, that was in the verse we saw above. Similar is looking mitzitz from the lattice. What's that? From the Song of Songs. Song of Songs, great love story in the Bible, collection of love poems brought together into one text, interpreted by the tradition, by the ancient rabbis, as a love story between us, the people of Israel, and the Creator, God. So what's going on in this verse is that God, the male partner in this partnership, we are the maiden and God is the male suitor. God is looking through the screen, through the lattice, like through the cracks in the window screen, and is looking for us. God is like trying to get a glimpse of his beloved, who is us. So I find this one really fascinating because Rashi's, and again, he's not making this up, it is based on an ancient teaching. The teaching is bringing together the verse that says, we look at our tzitzit, like I look at my tassels on my tzitzit, on my talit, I say, oh yeah, I'm supposed to remember the commandments. That is being compared to God peering through the screen, trying to get a glimpse of us with love and longing. So there's this beautiful juxtaposition of like our looking and God's looking. And we're being given a clue maybe about how to make this a practice which is meaningful and which does something for us positively, psychologically and spiritually, which is love. Love would really help, right? If when I look at my tzitzit, I feel guilt and shame, then or whatever other emotion, like it's just a very different practice and probably a lot less helpful. But if I look at it and I remember, like, God loves me, like there's a creator, and actually this the rest of the midrash, when it says that God is peering through the lattice trying to get a look of his beloved, it says specifically talking about how when we were in Egypt, when we were slaves in Egypt, and we didn't have much merit because we weren't doing many commandments, we weren't doing many good things at that point. In fact, we were almost completely lost spiritually, but nonetheless, we're told God looked at us and God just loved us to bits. But we had this like, beautiful merit in God's eyes, even though we hadn't really earned it. So that's the context or part of it, which I really love, for like looking at us. It's like God is looking lovingly at us. see a little bit more from Rashi. And you shall not wander after your hearts. He points out what I pointed out before. I think I got it from him, probably fair to say. The word for wander is like scouting the land. So the Torah uses the same word, just a few, really very close together, just a few paragraphs apart, the same word for scouting out the land, which again, the verb is tor, as in like similar to the English word for touring. And then the Hebrew for do not stray, do not look at the wrong things in the wrong way. And then Rashi brings this beautiful teaching from the Midrash about vision, and this really gets into our spiritual work for the month. He says the heart and the eyes are the spies for the body. So we obviously just had the story of the spies, right? And the Sith are really coming as like a remedy for what happened with the spies. And he's saying we all have these spies within us. Like we all have. The story of the spies is happening in microcosm inside every one of us. Our heart and our eyes could potentially be these spies who did not do the right things. They are its agent for transgressions. And how does this work? The eye sees, the heart covets, and the body commits the transgression. Now, of course, sometimes the eye sees good things and the heart wants good things, and we do good things too. He's not saying the whole picture is always bad. He's saying like this is how people make mistakes. The eye sees something, the heart wants it, and the body commits the transgression. And let's do one more source on that, and then let's come back together and see what's coming up for any of you. This is Rav Sadok again, his book was to say Lila, commenting very much on that point. But he says, and so the power of the eye affects the heart. As the Midrash says, the eye sees and the heart covets, as we just saw quoted by Rashi. Meaning that when the eye is absorbed in something, the thought is also absorbed in it. And it is known that wherever a person's thoughts are, there the entire person is. And through this, their heart is fixed, and from that follows every other part of them. So Rav Sadok is putting together that teaching we just saw Rashi quote, that whatever we look at, we're likely to want, and therefore act on that desire. He's putting that together with a teaching that the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, said many, many times, which is wherever a person's thoughts are, that's where a person's whole being is. Whatever we're thinking about, that's where we are. So you might be in this class, you might be talking to someone, you might be, I don't know, going to synagogue, you might be at work, you might be trying to do something else on your computer. What are you thinking about? Where is your mind at, really? Wherever it is, the Baal Shem Tov says that's where you really are. And Rav Sadok is putting that together here, and he's saying, what we let ourselves look at is going to affect that. It's going to determine that, right? Not completely, always, every time. I might look at something and be thinking about something else. But a lot of the time, what is in front of me is going to influence what I'm thinking about. And of course, again, therefore, what I'm going to want and what I'm going to do. And, this, for me, these teachings have special weight. Giving this class on Zoom, talking to you on my computer, and we're all surrounded by multiple screens, a lot of us, and a lot of the time bombarded, even when we're walking down the street, by other messages and so on. What do we choose to look at? What is our eye being drawn to that then is influencing our emotions and our thoughts, and therefore our actions? Right? That's some really important thing to think about this month. I'm just gonna stop sharing so we can come back together. I'd love to hear if anyone has any questions or comments. I'll look over the chat. Why is there a section on the blue cords and part about spies? I think we talked about that area, but feel free to come back if you want to ask something else about that. Specifying you shall not wander after your hearts implies that wandering is not inherently the issue. One should only wander after God. Emma, good question. So the word for wander implies a kind of like wayward wandering in Hebrew. Wandering after God is normally talked about like walking after God in Hebrew, like following a little bit less waywardly. So it has that connotation. Good question though. Erica says this proves it's impossible to multitask. But seriously, what then are we focused on when our eyes are closed? Ooh. So I think the answer is whatever we filled our consciousness with before, like whatever stimulated us before is going to influence that, right? But I don't think there's like a complete one-to-one relationship where I don't think the sources are saying whatever we look at that fills up our consciousness completely 100%. There are other influences too, like what happened before and so on, but to a large extent it influences it. So if I close my eyes, I don't stop thinking, I just think about stuff that I was exposed to before, or, whatever, the same processes carry on. If I open my eyes and I see all you again, or I see whatever I see, then that gives me a whole new load of stimulation, and if I went now to read the news or whatever, then like that will give me a whole new load of stimulation, a whole new load of things to think about and feel about. Steve says, can you give some context to relying on the eyewitnesses to verify a full moon, new moon, all sorts of things, rather than relying on astronomy of the day or whatever instruments were in use in ancient Greece during the time of the pharaohs of ancient Greece? Was there ever science involved? Did the eyewitnesses have any training or knowledge? Steve, I'll give a fairly short answer to that now, but you're welcome to follow up with me by email because it's a little bit on our subject and a little bit off it. Essentially, the ancient rabbis, up to roughly the time when the Second Temple was destroyed, they would proclaim that the new moon was in the sky and the new month had started based on people seeing it, witnesses, as you say, and they would interrogate those witnesses to make sure that they were telling the truth, and they would compare testimony from several different witnesses to make sure they got the truth. So no, the experts were not, the witnesses were not experts at all, but they were interrogated by experts to make sure they were telling the truth. And yes, there was, I don't know if science is the correct term, I really don't know, how science will be defined in this case, but there was definitely a lot of detailed knowledge involved of exactly how they did that. Mel says, seems like an invitation to be very intentional about where we direct our eyes, minds, hearts. Exactly. That's completely it, Mel. That's completely the work of the month. Thank you for articulating it so beautifully. And we'll see a bit more on how to do that, but that's very much the heart of it. Elaine says, so we need our eyes to see the Sith and to remember God's laws, but we cannot rely on our eyes like the spies. A dilemma. Beautifully put, right? Actually, Elaine, I want to hold that up. I think that really beautifully sums up the Jewish approach to a lot of things, which is there's very little that Judaism denies or says is bad. Like the body, sex, alcohol, these are all things that various other religions are a little bit uncomfortable with or a lot uncomfortable with and like deny in different ways, try and repress. Judaism says everything is good, everything is holy, potentially. Like we have to do the spiritual work of making it holy and good. So here's a good example. We're not told, for example, because if you walk around with your eyes open, you might see things you shouldn't see, that you should walk around like this. Like that's not what we're being told. But we are being told, as you say, to be very intentional about what we look at, right, and how we use that. And actually, Tzitzit is part of that, right? Tzitzit is a looking practice. Right? I look at the tassels, and I think about things like how much God loves me, or whatever the other associations are. We'll see some other ones, and that's instead of looking at other things, right? It's doing something for me. Right, good point. Like the verse Judy says, "We place before you a blessing and a curse." Exactly. Miss Mia says, didn't Hashem take Moshe and show him what to look for in the new moon during Passover? Yes, that's exactly how the first new moon was proclaimed. Exactly, very good. That's exactly that. And then from that actually came that whole process I mentioned just now in my response to Steve about the rabbis interrogating people saying, did you see it like this or like this? That was all based on that story about God showing Moses the moon for the first time. Thank you. Elaine says, in the Maftir of Shalach, we are exhorted not to explore with our eyes and our hearts. Exactly, right. Beautiful. Cheryl says, yes, Mel, thinking about how do we bring fresh eyes, beginner's mind, to truly see, notice the fuller picture. Oh, Cheryl, that's brilliant. That actually really relates to the next source. So I'm going to come back to that comment then when we see the next source. Elaine says, looking is not enough, right? Just looking is not always enough. It's the way that we look, right? So let's see a couple more comments and then we'll see a bit more on the sheet. Erica says, the mechitza became minchag. So mechitza is the barrier that some traditional communities have between men and women who pray separately in traditional communities, in Orthodox communities mostly. So the mechitza is that barrier, and it became minchag, it became a tradition to have that. It shows that men were not able to be intentional about focusing their eyes on the service when women are in synagogue. Yeah, Erica, it's a very legitimate way of telling that story. Absolutely. Emma says, to Elaine's point, it seems that through sight, we're meant to mimic God's act of separating the light and the dark. Exactly. Oh, Emma, thank you so much for bringing us back to that first source, right? We saw that right at the beginning, and I really wanted that to like set the scene for everyone. That, sight, remember the first time sight appears in the Torah, as we saw together, is God saying, oh, there's light, and it's good, as opposed to dark. And as Rav Sadok said in that first source, sight is all about differentiation. Brilliant. Thank you for reminding us of that. Let's see. To see, we need light, alignment, and focus, as Gabe. His light, his promises, his lens through which the law is what allowed the spy's vision to be true, while the others fell in foresight. Beautiful. So I think if I'm understanding Gabe correctly, he's saying, we can't see anything without the context that God provides. And if we see in the correct light or context of what God is showing us, then that's correct sight and we'll see the right things. And if not, not. And Cheryl says, where is the text of God showing Moses the moon? That is Exodus chapter 12, right at the beginning, in Rashi's commentary on it. And I can send it to you after if you want. No problem at all. It's from in the Midrash and the Mishnah, and Rashi brings it. Exodus chapter 12. Sometimes our eyes can decide us, and that light is not real, or maybe deceive us, and that light is not real, and that is why it is so important to follow Hashem. Exactly, Raymond, right? We are all blessed, those of us who are blessed to see physically, right? Even those who are not, we all have some kind of ability to see or to perceive the world, but are we perceiving it correctly? Right? Are we seeing it correctly? Exactly. And Raymond's comment is, we have to follow God. Of course, I would say, Raymond, it's not always easy to know what God wants, but our practice and our path is to try and find out what that is. Well, let's see a little bit more together from the sheet about, this spiritual work. I'm really grateful for all these wonderful things you shared. But let's see, some of the things on the sheet will reflect nicely on what you shared. And Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, as Julie mentioned, actually, my next offering for my Jewish learning is going to be a little mini series on him, a few classes on him. Amazing Hasidic master, visionary, storyteller, very, very big imagination, very big heart, very powerful spiritual thinker and practitioner. So he said something amazing here that actually this really foreshadowed what contemporary science, what quantum science now says about the way the reality works and sight works. He says vision involves direct light and returning light. The direct light spreads out our vision, and the returning light allows us to see the desired object. So the first part we already talked about, that's not quantum, that's just like what regular science tells us about sight. That's how sight works. When I'm seeing something, it's because light is returning to my eye from that object. Great. But no, he says, that looking at something creates a container, meaning boundaries and time. For before you looked at the object, it had no boundaries. And when you look at it, that gives it boundaries. What's he saying? He's saying us looking at something actually changes it. It actually affects it. And this is sometimes called the effect of the observer, which again is a principle in quantum science, which was discovered relatively recently, really, the mid 20th century. People began to take this seriously. That when we look at something, we're actually affecting it on a atomic and molecular level, on an existential level. And of course, that also applies in our relationships with ourselves and with other people. When we look at people in a certain way, that doesn't just affect our relationship with them, it actually affects them, right? I'm sure we've all had the experience of people looking at us in a certain way, and that changing how we feel and therefore how we behave. But he's saying that's how the world is. That's how reality is. If I look at something, I give it boundaries. I create a certain realness around it, a certain container around it that makes it more real than it was before in a certain way. And if I don't look at something, if I look at something different, that changes the world. See a little bit more together. And this specifically about tzitzit. We just have a few minutes left, so I want to see more about this sight practice, which is so key to our month. We won't have time for the whole sheet, but let's at least finish this section. So from the Talmud in Menachot, which is a lot about tzitzit, he says, why is this color, there's a special color I mentioned before, the special blue or turquoise that tzitzit, the tassels used to be made of, and some people still do this today. So why is this special turquoise so special? Why is it different from all the other colors, this techelet? He says, because this turquoise or techelet is similar to the sea, and the sea is similar to the heavens, and the heavens are similar to the throne of glory, that's God's throne, as it is stated, and there was under their feet the like of a paved work of sapphire stone, and the likeness of the essence of heaven for clearness, from Exodus 24. And it is written, a throne as the appearance of a sapphire stone. So what's going on there? We're basically being given a practice for when we look at the tassels of our tzitzit or our talit, or indeed another object if you want to use for a similar practice. This color that it may or may not have, actually, we're being asked to see the turquoise. You can imagine it, or you can find some parallel or substitute. This color of this techelet, this turquoise, is supposed to remind us of the sea. Now, how's it going to remind us of the sea? We have to imagine the sea, right? We have to look at it and think of the sea. So imagine the sea, okay. And then the sea is meant to remind us of the sky, the heavens. So, okay, think of the sea, now think of the heavens. Then what do the heavens make us think of? The throne of glory, God's throne, which may or may not be an image that you meditate on regularly and something you're familiar with. But if you look at this passage in Exodus 24 that this quote is taken from, you'll see a description of some people having a vision of the divine throne, kind of. It's actually very obscure and not super clear. You won't get like a whole lot of details about what God looks like or anything like that, because we don't believe in the God that you can describe like that. But nonetheless, you can begin to get like a taste for the kind of mystical vision that the tradition talked about, and you can imagine what that might be like for yourself if you like. So again, the practice is look at the tzitzit, the turquoise or something else you want to use, and think of the sea, which in itself is very inspiring, right? The vast sea. And then think of the sky, and then think of whatever to you it means, whatever it looks like, the creator and the creator's throne of glory, right? Whatever images that conjures for you. So that's one practice we can do when we think of tzitzit. Remember, the other one we already talked about before was thinking about God looking lovingly at us, right? That's another practice we can do when we look at tzitzit. Now we're going to see another one from Midrash Tanachuma. When Israel look at those tzitzit, the fringes of turquoise, it appears to them as if the Shekhinah is dwelling between them. I love this one because it's really focused on the relationships between people, right? So far as the Lord talk about me and God, me and God, me and God, but this one is saying, look at my tzitzit and remember specifically, and of course this is only going to work if I condition myself to do this by training myself to do this. So I might want to write it on a piece of paper and put it on the wall, or put it on a piece of paper and put it in my prayer book, or whatever it is, to remind myself to do this regularly until it becomes habitual. Right? Look at my prayer tassels and let it remind me by building this association. I have to build these neural pathways. Let it remind me that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, that's the Shekhinah, is dwelling between me and other people around me, all people. That's what the tradition says. Shekhinah, the divine presence, dwells between people, in the relationships between people. So if I want to have a relationship with the divine, I have to work on my relationships with other people, in other words. And my tzitzit, my tassels, my fringes can remind me of that if I choose to make that association. Of course, it's up to me. You have plenty of people wear tassels and all kinds of different ritual objects, and it doesn't remind them of that. It's up to us, what associations we build with that. One more source in this section, and then I'll finish. The whole last section, the conclusion, I knew I wouldn't have time for. I just threw it in as a gift for you guys, so you can look it over in your own time if you want, and email me about it if you want to also. It's juicy stuff. But let's just do this one last little snippet from the Zohar, and then let's close together. Zohar says, were it not for the supernal eye gazing upon and bathing the lower eye, the world could not endure for a single moment. So the world, before we saw this idea that like God looks lovingly at us, right? And especially before taking us out of Egypt. But here we're saying, the Zohar is saying, nothing could exist without the supernal eye, God's eye, the divine eye, lovingly. It has to be with love, because it's giving creation to the whole world. Giving the gift of creation to the world, bathing it, right? Gazing upon and bathing it. So one way, in other words, one way of understanding or imagining maybe God is an eye. That we sometimes think of God as old man in the sky, maybe a brain, maybe a heart, consciousness, whatever it is that comes to my view. But one way of imagining it is God's eye gives creation reality. God makes creation possible by gazing at everything here. And if it weren't for that loving gaze of creation, as he says, nothing could exist. Let's come back together and let's hear from you guys. Let me see what's on the chat. Let's see. Right. Erica, can you please remind us where the dye comes from that's used in talit and fringes? Yes, it's from a sea creature called a chilazon. And the color blue is different from what we know of as turquoise. What is the root for Hebrew word for blue? So techelet is this turquoise versus kachol, which is blue. So actually similar letters, but not exactly the same. So that they are different. So yeah, turquoise techelet is not just regular blue, it is turquoise. Emma says, how do we get from sapphire to turquoise though? So the tradition does conflate those pretty much actually. That does say that those are very close together. Yeah, thanks for asking that. As far as I've seen, I haven't seen anyone say anything insightful about the difference between them. Harriet says, I was taught the Shekhinah is God's feminine side, i.e. gentle side. Yes, exactly, Harry, that's true. Shekhinah is God's presence in this world, which is feminine and generally more motherly and gentle and loving. That's absolutely true. James says, like a soldier, it keeps us in good conduct, like a soldier's uniform. Right, so that's one way of relating to any ritual object, especially one that we wear. It could be like a kind of uniform that I wear to remind myself of doing the right things. So I want to say, we can do that with a kind of rigorous discipline, or we can do it lovingly. Maybe a mixture of discipline and love is ultimately going to make for a more sustainable and healthy and nourishing practice, I would say. Elaine says, chelazon, that's right, that's the creature we get it from. A type of semi-aquatic creature, yes. Emma says, yes, I like that quote, awesome. Mel says, makes me think of the way people get tattoos. To them, provide that same cooling. Right, brilliant. I really like that comparison. Our tradition, the Torah, says don't get tattoos. But there's something similar here about that practice. I think that's a brilliant comparison, right? Some people get tattoos with a kind of like reminder, right? I want to call in a certain idea, as you say, remind myself of something. Brilliant. Let's see. Miss B. Mia says, is God's divine eye where the hamster comes from? Honestly, I don't know. I've seen the hamster connected to the idea of looking at things with a good eye and kind of warding off the evil eye. I don't know if it's also connected to the idea of God's eye. So I got an anonymous question. No one knows exactly what techela is, if it's not able to be used. So some people say that they do know what techela is. Some people say they're pretty sure that they do know this color, this turquoise. They can identify it and therefore they use it. So it's a difference of opinion between rabbis. And then James says it also reminds us, brilliant point from James about this. It also reminds others when they see it, even if they may not understand. I really appreciate that point. So again, just like a tattoo, right? Again, very different, not traditional practice, but still does something similar. It's not only about what it does for us when we see it, it's also about other people seeing it as well. So I know this is definitely true for me. If I see someone else wearing tzitzit or whatever else, it definitely has an impact on me. Brilliant. Becca says, gratitude for the class. Thank you. You're so welcome. You're so welcome, Becca. And a few other lovely thank you messages. Thanks everyone so much. Well, this is a good time to say I'm sorry for going over time, but really thanks everyone for a lovely class and a privilege of teaching and learning from, really, and with all of you. And as I said before, I would really welcome people being in touch, especially if you would like information on other classes like this one or other ones. I'm not ones I'm doing through My Jewish Learning also, but also other ones. So there's my email, and thank you again to Julie and My Jewish Learning for hosting and making it possible.